Good evening, everyone. Well, things are starting to pick up steam around here. This will be the last Wednesday message by video, at least in this format. We'll still live stream the services on Wednesdays, so I hope that if you're not able to be with us in church, that you'll still be able to join us online. I'm still so excited about how God has provided for our church with the completion of some long-standing projects. The new door is in the back, and we have a new projector and screen at the front, and we have been able to purchase 200 new folding chairs. And this leaves us with quite a few older folding chairs that we need to get rid of. We don't want to keep them cluttering up our garage, so the board has decided to put them up for sale to our church. We want to give it to our attendees first and then open it to the public. We're going to sell them for $1 a piece. They're still in working order. Some just have been nicked or scratched. So if you'd like to purchase some of these chairs, just contact me and I'll make sure that the doors are open and that you're able to come get those. Any money from that you can just put into the offering box when you come get the chairs. After a few weeks, we'll open them up to the community for sale. Well, this evening I want to take a look at our next chapter in Psalms, Psalm 27. In this psalm, we see the psalmist tells us how we can overcome fear. You know, fear is a paralyzing force that is common among every man, woman, and child. From a very young age, we learn to fear without ever being taught. Soon, imaginations of monsters under our bed turn into the realities of real monsters in our lives. Monsters like violent criminals, natural disasters, diseases, war, loss of employment, accidents, old age, betrayal, losing a parent or a spouse. Fear is something we all face, but it's more than an emotion, it's a spiritual enemy. The Bible tells us that fear is not of God. The truth is, it's often a fruit of our own sinful nature, a nature that tends to not trust in God. But David here in the psalm gives us insight into how to combat fear. He begins his psalm with statements of testimony about God. Then around verse 7, he begins to pray, intermingled with testimonies, reminding himself of the goodness of God. In verse 1, we see him begin testifying to the goodness of God. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? And then in verses 2 through 6, he continues with this testimony. First, he talks about the stability he has in God. He says, when the wicked, even mine enemies and my foes, come upon me to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and fell. And then in verse 3, he speaks of the confidence he has in God. Though an host should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war should rise against me, in this will I be confident. And then in verses 4 and 5, he speaks of the dwelling that keeps his fear at bay. He says, one thing have I desired of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord, and to inquire in his temple. For in the time of trouble, he shall hide me in his pavilion. In the secret of his tabernacle shall he hide me. He shall set me up upon a rock. And then in verse 6, we see the song that he sings in testimony of his confidence in God. He says, and now shall mine head be lifted up above mine enemies round about me. Therefore will I offer in his tabernacle sacrifices of joy. I will sing, yea, I will sing praises unto the Lord. Then in verse number 7, David turns and begins requesting from the Lord. And he begins by requesting mercy. He says, hear, O Lord, when I cry with my voice. Have mercy also upon me and answer me. David then gives testimony that he has obeyed the voice of the Lord. He says, when thou saidst, seek ye my face, my heart said unto thee, thy face, Lord, will I seek. Now in verse 9, David gives another request for God to be close to him or close by him. He says, hide not thy face far from me. Put not thy servant away in anger. Thou hast been my help. Leave me not, neither forsake me, O God of my salvation. And then in verse 10, David testifies to the knowledge that God will be there. He says, when my father and my mother forsake me, then the Lord will take me up. He goes back and forth between this prayer and testimony. Now he asks for guidance from God in verse 11. Teach me thy way, O Lord, and lead me in plain path because of mine enemies. I've prayed that numerous times. In verse 12, we see him continuing his appeal for safety. Deliver me not over unto the will of mine enemies, for false witnesses are risen up against me, and such as breathe out cruelty. In the end here, David affirms his testimony in verses 13 and 14. He says, excuse me, I had fainted unless I believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thine heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. David in this psalm gives us a good example of what we can do when we're afraid. David first reminds himself in the form of a testimony as to the goodness and protection of God. David then begins his request from God, asking for mercy, asking to feel close to God again, asking for guidance and asking for safety, all the while reminding himself of who God is and what God has and will do for him. If you find yourself in fear today, speak the truth about God. Request His help and guidance. I genuinely believe that this is the secret to victory over fear. I pray that you're having a wonderful week. May the Lord richly bless you. Good evening.